For 70 years, the Java Sea guarded the graves of over 2,000 Allied sailors. Lost ships, like De Ruyter and Exeter, resting undisturbed beneath the waves. Then, one day, those underwater tombs simply vanished. This isn't just a story of a lost World War II fleet found after decades. It's about how that entire battlefield was stolen from history, and why the truth behind the disappearance raises urgent questions that haven't been answered to this day. In February 1942, as Japanese forces surged across Southeast Asia, the Allies scrambled to defend the Dutch East Indies, an archipelago rich in oil, vital to both sides. The American, British, Dutch, Australian Command, known as ABDA, came together in crisis. Their aim was simple: stop Japan from seizing the resources that fueled its war machine. But the fleet they assembled was a patchwork of old cruisers, destroyers, and submarines, many built before the First World War. Ammunition was limited, radar was scarce, and the ships themselves were battered from earlier battles. Rear Admiral Karel Doorman, commanding from the Dutch cruiser De Ruyter, faced a nearly impossible task. He had to unite crews from 4 nations, each with different languages and tactics, and lead them against a superior enemy. Japanese naval power in the region was overwhelming. Newer ships, better guns, and the deadly Type 93 torpedo, unmatched in range and power. The Japanese timetable was relentless. Every day, their forces moved closer to Java, capturing airfields and harbors, cutting off Allied supply lines. Intelligence reports warned that a major invasion convoy was assembling, protected by heavy cruisers and destroyers. Doorman knew the stakes. If Java fell, the last Allied foothold in Southeast Asia would be lost, and with it, the region's oil. ABDA's ships gathered at Surabaya, their decks crowded with young sailors writing hurried letters home. Doorman's pre-battle signals reveal both determination and worry. He wrote of frightful odds and the burden of sending men to face near certain death. Yet he resolved to fight, whatever the cost. As night fell, the fleet slipped out to sea, engines rumbling, ready to intercept the enemy. The fate of the Java Sea and thousands of lives hung in the balance. Shells landed short, then long, as the two fleets probed for range. The Allied line pressed forward, outgunned and exposed. HMS Exeter took the first major hit. Japanese gunners from Haguro found their mark, sending a shell through Exeter's boiler room. Steam burst through the decks. 40 men died instantly, and the cruiser limped out of formation, smoke pouring from her stacks. Minutes later, the Dutch destroyer Kortenaar vanished in a single violent blow. A Type 93 torpedo, fired from over 22,000 yards away, far beyond what Allied crews believed possible, struck her amidships. The hull split in two. 66 men went down with the ship. Survivors clung to debris, oil burning on the surface around them. HMS Electra turned toward the enemy, guns blazing. She covered the battered Exeter, drawing fire from Japanese cruisers and destroyers. A shell struck Electra's bridge, then another hit the engine room. The destroyer lost power, rolled, and sank, taking 126 sailors with her. Those who escaped described the water as thick with oil and the sky lit by burning ships. Night fell, but the battle did not end. HNL MS Java, a Dutch light cruiser, was hit by a torpedo just after 10 p.m. The explosion reached her magazine. In seconds, the ship was torn apart, flames racing through the decks. 741 men died, almost the entire crew. Moments later, De Ruyter, Admiral Doorman's flagship, was struck by another torpedo. Fire swept through the bridge. Doorman's last signal echoed across the radios. Ik val aan, volg mij. I am attacking, follow me. The ship slipped beneath the waves, taking Doorman and 367 others with her. By dawn, over 2,300 Allied sailors were dead. The Java Sea had become their grave. The survivors, adrift, wounded, many later captured, remembered the confusion, the noise, and the faces lost in the darkness. The names of the ships, Exeter, Courtenay, Electra, Java, de Ruyter, became a list of sacrifice, sealed beneath the waves for decades to come. For decades, the Java Sea kept its secrets. Families mourned without graves, and the names of lost ships faded into the blue. That changed in the early 2000s, when Dutch and British teams set out to find what the war had left behind. Using side-scan sonar and remotely operated vehicles, they mapped the seabed with precision, tracing the outlines of ships once thought gone forever. Between 2002 and 2008, 7 wrecks were charted: de Ruyter, Java, Courtenay, Exeter, Electra, Encounter, and the American submarine Perch. Each site became a point of pilgrimage and study. Divers and ROV pilots recorded everything. They logged the battered hulls, the twisted guns, the anchor chains buried under silt. In the darkness, their lights caught glimpses of the past: a rusted watch still strapped to a skeleton's wrist, a corroded dog tag stamped with a sailor's name, black and white photographs sealed in mud, boots lined up along a collapsed corridor. Every artifact was cataloged, photographed, and left undisturbed. The teams careful to treat these sites as war graves, not salvage. Expedition leaders described moments of quiet awe. One diver recalled finding the bell of the Java, half buried but intact, its name still visible beneath a layer of sand. Another spoke of reading the time on a cracked wristwatch, stopped forever at the moment of sinking. These discoveries gave families a place to grieve and the world a chance to remember. The precise coordinates and ROV footage were archived in naval museums and defense agencies, guarded from public release to protect the wrecks from harm. By the end of the decade, the Java Sea's lost fleet was no longer just a legend. It was a mapped reality, documented, honored, and for the first time in generations, given back to memory. The silence below was now marked by presence, not absence. In November 2016, divers returned to the Java Sea, expecting to pay tribute at the resting places of lost ships and their crews. Instead, they found emptiness. Where the hulks of de Ruyter and Java had once settled on the seabed, only vast craters remained, scars gouged into the sand, silent and raw. Sonar scans from the early 2000s showed the clear outlines of warships, their decks and turrets still recognizable beneath layers of silt. The new scans revealed nothing but voids, some stretching over 60 meters wide. The wrecks were gone, erased so completely that even the anchor chains had vanished. The shock was immediate and deeply personal. Expedition leaders described a wave of disbelief, then anger. One Dutch diver, who had helped document the Java's bell years before, said, "It felt like losing them all over again." Another, a descendant of a sailor lost on de Ruyter, learned of the disappearance through a single sentence in an expedition report. He later wrote, "They took the only grave my father's friends ever had." The physical evidence was undeniable. Crater edges showed marks from heavy machinery, deep gouges, twisted metal, and the telltale signature of industrial salvage. There were no artifacts left behind, no bones, no boots, no fragments of personal history. Forensic teams found traces of disturbed sediment and scattered debris, but the context was shattered. Where divers had once cataloged dog tags and watches, now there was only disrupted sand. Protests erupted across 4 nations. The Netherlands issued a formal diplomatic note, calling the loss a violation of war graves. The United Kingdom, United States, and Australia each sent their own demands for answers, their statements echoing through parliaments and embassies. "A graveyard for over 2,000 men has simply been erased," read one memorial group's letter. Veterans and families spoke of betrayal, of friends killed not just by war, but by the hunger for scrap. The outrage was sharpened by the knowledge that no warning had come, no one had been held to account, and the sea's silence had been broken not by remembrance, but by theft. The Java Sea, once mapped by memory and loss, now offered only absence. Where families had found a measure of peace, there was now a second, more final disappearance. The craters on the seabed became a new kind of memorial, one defined not by what was left, but by what had been stolen. Multi-beam sonar overlays from the early 2000s and 2016 revealed the truth in sharp clinical detail. The original surveys showed the silhouettes of entire warships, long continuous hulls, superstructures, and turrets mapped in precise detail. When forensic teams returned, those outlines had vanished. What remained were massive craters, some 60 meters wide, with the seabed gouged and swept clean. The difference is not gradual decay. It is the signature of heavy machinery at work, an absence measured in hundreds of tons of missing steel. Forensic experts pored over the new data. ROV footage documented the edges of these craters, where thick steel plating ended in unnaturally straight lines. Close-ups show surfaces scorched and blackened, the result of oxy-fuel or plasma torches. In places, hull fragments were pinched and torn by mechanical shears, leaving compressed, twisted metal. Marks impossible to confuse with the slow corrosion of decades underwater. Scour marks and suction scars run across the crater floors, tracing the paths of industrial dredges and airlift hoses. These are not the random wounds of souvenir hunters. They are the footprints of a systematic extraction operation. The scale of removal matches the capabilities of floating crane barges and claw-equipped salvage ships. Magnetometer logs confirm the loss of thousands of tons of iron and copper, entire engines, propellers, and armored belts, all gone. Salvage engineers reviewing the evidence point to the use of high-capacity winches and heavy lift gear, the kind found only on specialized industrial platforms. In interviews, maritime archaeologists describe the chain of evidence: clean-cut steel, disturbed sediment, and the complete absence of personal artifacts or human remains. The context is erased as thoroughly as the ships themselves. Satellite tracking data adds another layer. The Automatic Identification System, or AIS, is supposed to track ships at sea. But in the weeks when the wrecks disappeared, vessels operating over the Java Sea went dark. Transponders switched off, signals vanishing from maritime records. When they reappeared, they were docked at scrapyards in Java, Sumatra, and southern China. Port records and customs manifests misclassified the cargo as generic ferrous scrap, masking its true origin. Experts traced serial-numbered hull plates from Java Sea ships to scrapyards, and eventually to buyers in Chinese foundries and laboratories. This is industrial crime, confirmed by the evidence left behind. The Java Sea wrecks were not lost to time or nature. They were taken, systematically, piece by piece, by hands guided not by memory, but by profit. Steel from the Java Sea wrecks did not linger in local scrapyards for long. Once torn from the seabed, hull plates and fittings were trucked to breakers in Surabaya, Brondong, and along Malaysia's coast. Scrap brokers moved quickly, buying up loads by the ton, no questions asked. From there, the metal entered a labyrinth of middlemen, export agents, and bulk shippers. Most of it traveled under generic paperwork, labeled as ordinary ferrous scrap. Yet some batches, especially those with clear pre-war markings, fetched a premium from buyers who knew their true value. At the heart of the trade lies a peculiar market, the demand for low background steel. Unlike modern steel, which carries traces of radioactive fallout from nuclear testing, steel made before 1945 is free from contamination. This purity makes it vital for scientific instruments, gamma ray detectors, hospital imaging machines, and spacecraft sensors. Laboratories and manufacturers, especially in China, quietly compete for these rare supplies. The price for such steel can reach several times that of ordinary scrap, turning sunken warships into lucrative targets. A metallurgist familiar with the trade describes the process. You test a sample for isotope levels. If it's clean, pre-nuclear, you can sell it to a lab for twice or 3 times the going rate. There's no substitute. Brokers in Southeast Asia often blend this metal with bulk shipments, hiding the most valuable plates among regular scrap. Invoices are vague, and export routes twist through shell companies and transshipment ports, before final delivery to foundries in Guangdong or Shandong. Some steel is melted down for new scientific equipment, some is simply lost in the churn of global industry. The supply chain is built on secrecy and speed. Salvage crews, scrapyard operators, and brokers each take a cut. But the real profits flow to those who understand what's hidden inside a ship's hull. The market for low background steel is small but relentless. Every untouched wreck is a potential windfall. Every missing grave a line item in someone's ledger. International outrage over the vanished WWII wrecks has produced a flurry of resolutions, but little real protection. In 2010, Indonesia enacted a heritage law meant to safeguard underwater cultural sites, including shipwrecks. The law forbids unauthorized salvage and designates war graves as protected zones. On paper, this was a step forward. In practice, enforcement has been weak. Vast stretches of sea remain unpatrolled, and the resources to monitor or police these remote sites are limited. Local officials cite a lack of vessels, personnel, and funding. Salvage operators, well aware of these gaps, work quickly and quietly, often disguising their ships and switching off tracking systems. Calls for stronger action have come from UNESCO and a chorus of maritime heritage organizations. They have urged Indonesia to implement exclusion zones, increase patrols, and prosecute those responsible for desecrating war graves. Despite these demands, prosecutions are rare. When authorities do act, penalties are often minor. The most telling example came in 2024, when the Chinese dredger MV Chuanhong 68 was detained after being caught over the remains of British warships, HMS Repulse and HMS Prince of Wales. The evidence was clear: salvage equipment on board, hull fragments in the hold, and a track record of operating at historic wreck sites across Southeast Asia. Yet the charges brought against the crew were limited to paperwork violations, missing permits, improper documentation. Fines were paid, and the vessel was released to continue its operations. UNESCO and naval heritage groups have condemned these outcomes as little more than token gestures. Their reports warn that without meaningful legal consequences, the looting will only accelerate. The absence of real accountability has left the WWII's remaining war graves exposed, their fate dependent not on international resolve, but on the thin shield of paperwork and promises. In 2002, survey teams mapped 7 Allied warships in the WWII, each a confirmed resting place for over 2,300 sailors lost in 1942. By 2016, side-scan sonar and dive footage documented that several of these graves had been erased by industrial salvage, with only craters and scattered remains left behind. Official records show that despite protests from 4 nations and calls for action by UNESCO, enforcement remains limited. The 2024 detention of the MV Chuanhong 68 in Southeast Asia, charged only with paperwork violations, exposed the ongoing vulnerability of underwater heritage. Still, the full fate of many artifacts and human remains remains untraced. This case leaves a clear record. Historical memory can be erased as surely as steel, and without vigilance, even war graves are at risk. The WWII story is now a warning. Preservation is not just remembrance, but an active responsibility.